As we know, each day, Christians around the world face government-sanctioned harassment, persecution, punishment, sometimes even death, simply for being Christians. Well, International Christian Concern has a new report highlighting the nation's entities and world leaders that are trampling on religious freedom. Now, some of these nations are repeat offenders. You'll recognize them, nations like Nigeria, China, and North Korea. Others, sadly, are new to the list. Here to unpack this new report is Jeff King, president of International Christian Concern. Jeff, welcome back to Washington Watch.
Oh, thank you, Joseph. Pleasure to be with you.
Now, tell us about this updated report that you have. Which countries have made the list, maybe for the first time?
Yeah, so this is a report that we put out once a year. We want to bring attention for journalists, for Capitol Hill, for legislators, bring attention and bring some expertise to what's going on. It's a very complex subject, and so it's kind of a primer. And so this year, there is some attention given to the point that North Korea is below Nigeria. And that is purposeful. While North Korea can always be number 1 or 2 on the list, we wanted to move Nigeria to the top. And Joseph, if you look at the last 20 years, imagine probably up to 100,000 Christians killed, 3.5 million farmers pushed off their lands, their land stolen. And this is all from radical Islamists. And the mind bender in all this is that year after year, they come to Washington and they say, my gosh, this is such a hard problem to tackle. We're doing our best. Maybe if you sent more money or arms, we could do a better job. And the only thing I say to people is you look at the United States, and to scale these numbers up to the United States, imagine the last 20 years, 400,000 Christians have been murdered. And 18 million people kicked out of their homes, and the government never does anything. And the reason is because the Islamists are embedded in the government and they control the organs of the security organs of the state. And so that's intel, that's police, army, et cetera. So Washington, I think, is slowly waking up to this and saying this is actually a religious conflict. They didn't actually even see that before. So that's part of the reason why we're doing that.
Can you tell us also a bit about the factors that these nations have in common? What do you see in all of these places that allow them to, make this list, reach this status?
Yeah, well, there's some driving forces around the world. And so Marxism is still there. Marxism used to be the story. And then back in the 80s, the Saudis took their oil wealth and they radicalized the world's Muslims all over the world. They were bringing mosque leaders back to Saudi Arabia and radicalizing them, building radical mosques, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's why you see today an explosion of Islamic violence, radicalism, et cetera, on all different levels. And so there's that. That's a real big story today, as well as just, it's humanity. And so we fear that which is different. You always are going to see some of that. That which is different or foreign, and India falls into that category, for instance. India is a very interesting case, a country with religious freedom. Just think of Mahatma Gandhi and his message of peace and tolerance, and then what's happened is radical Hindus have taken control under Prime Minister Modi. He's the head of the snake. He's the head problem, but he'll never say anything publicly. He's too smart a politician to say anything publicly, but his political party, the BJP, and those leaders under him are very vocal, and there's no getting around what their message is about Christians, and that India needs to be a Hindu-only nation, and there's no room for anybody else. Yeah. So those are the big factors. But the surprising thing is this: it's like think about this. Overseas, the dictator will say we have religious freedom. In China, they'll say we have religious freedom. But what they do is they say it just doesn't belong in the public square. So as long as you keep quiet, as long as you keep that to yourself, you don't spread it, and you just keep it to yourself, no problem. Now, where does that sound familiar? That's the problem. That's what we're seeing creep into the West, even into the United States, being pushed out of the public square. The complete intolerance towards Christianity and Christians. So I think that's one of the most surprising things we're seeing.
Jeff, a couple new additions to this in about a minute. Eritrea, northeastern Africa, Azerbaijan, and Eastern Europe. Both of these have been added to the list more recently. What's going on in these places?
Well, Eritrea is, it's kind of shown up on our list time and again, but we're trying to bring more attention to it. So I've actually been to Eritrea a few years ago. So it's a place run by a dictator. The guy's been there for almost 30 years, completely intolerant. And part of the deal is that Christianity, and this is the story in a lot of these countries, Christianity is growing. So what you'll see is, though, the complete intolerance for owning a Bible. If you're caught with a Bible, you could be imprisoned. And oftentimes when you're in prison, you end up in a shipping container in the desert, in the sun, if you can imagine that. And with Azerbaijan, they basically went to war with Armenia and a part of Armenia. And it was kind of a two-stage war, but they kind of finished off this enclave of Armenians this year. And you have to understand the background and the context, because this is Islam. They were working with Turkey, and the Armenians have lost millions of Christians over the last 100 years.
Yeah. Jeff, last question. Where can people go to read this report and get more information?
Yeah, go to persecution.org. You can also look up International Christian Concern and the Persecutor of the Year report.
Jeff King, president of International Christian Concern, thank you for this report and your diligence, your vigilance in bringing us what we need to know about this critical information and this movement around the globe. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you, Joseph.